Hey folks, this is Ray at Rainmaker.com, and today I've got 12 things to know about the new Garmin Instinct 2 series. Now, never before has Garmin added as many new features from version to version as they have with the Instinct 2 series. It is absolutely bonkers how many new features there are on this watch. Now, I would encourage you to stay to the end of the video because it's not been the smoothest testing experience for me. I've had these watches for almost 2 months now testing them, and this is in all sorts of conditions, everything from like jungles like this to volcanoes and oceanside cliffs, the whole bit, trying to put these through their paces and figure out where they work well and where they need a little bit of love. Still, before we get into all that, first we got to talk about all the newness. And the very first thing to know is there are 2 different versions of the Instinct 2 series. There's the Instinct 2 and then the smaller Instinct 2S. The Instinct 2 is 45 millimeters, the 2S is 40 millimeters, and then on top of that there are solar editions of both of those, and then beyond that there's also the specialty editions. There's like 20 plus editions of the Instinct 2 family in total. In terms of what I've been testing, I've been using both the Instinct 2, the Instinct 2 Solar, as well as the Instinct 2S Solar right there that my wife has also been testing. Now, from a pricing standpoint, the units are $349 for the base editions or $100 more at $449 for the Solar variants, and if you want one of the Surf or Tactical editions, it's $399 for the base and $499 for the Solar variants. Finally, it's worth noting that the Solar edition has Garmin Pay on it. That's the contactless payments where you can go ahead and just simply tap the watch and pay for things. That is not on the base edition, but that is the only software feature difference, aside from Solar of course, between the base editions and the Solar editions. And of course, from a design standpoint, you'll either love or hate the Instinct series looks. It's got a little bit of that Casio flair to it, or rather a lot of that Casio flair to it, meaning it has a full ruggedized exterior, but has the smarts of any other normal Garmin watch. Okay, the next big item is massive. It is a huge increased number of sport profiles, and there's some big ticket ones on this. The first one is it now supports a full triathlon or multi-sport mode. In the past, the Instinct 2 series never did that. It also adds a bunch of new cycling profiles, for example, around gravel bikes and mountain bike and all the kind of stuff you can now do as a profile on the watch itself. It adds the entire sport of golf, including golf course downloads. Now, you may be looking at that list going, that looks awfully similar to the Fenix 7 list. And you're right, it does. The sport profile list between the Instinct and the Fenix 7 are almost identical. But there are, of course, way more features beyond that, and for that, I've got you covered. Tomorrow, I've got a video coming up that details the differences between the Instinct 2 series and the Fenix 7 series. So if that interests you, check out that video. It's probably somewhere on the screen, or if you're watching this before tomorrow, then just hit subscribe instead. Next up is a biggie, and this is one that probably sounds a bit boring, but is super important, which is that Garmin has added Connect IQ support to the Instinct 2 series. This means that you not only can get Connect IQ watch faces, like the one you see right there, but you also can get Connect IQ data fields supporting a wide number of different third-party platforms and apps and sensors and devices, as well as third-party widgets via Widget Glances. And one of the reasons they were able to add Connect IQ support is because of the increased screen resolution. So it's gone from 126 by 126 up to 176 by 176 pixels, which if you're using most of the Garmin portions of the device, you'll never notice it at all. Like, you just simply won't. But when you start adding Connect IQ watch faces and Connect IQ apps that may do more intensive things, that's when you'll see that difference. Further, it's with this Connect IQ support that Garmin's been able to add other features like female health tracking with menstrual cycle, as well as pregnancy tracking via Connect IQ apps that they can load onto the watch. Next up, Garmin has increased both the battery and the solar capacity and solar efficiency levels of the Instinct 2 series. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Garmin's solar technology, here's like a 15-second primer. On the outer edge of the Instinct series is a portion of the solar panel that gets all the sun's rays. This is simplified a bit, but it gets 100% of what hits that portion of the panel. But in addition to the outer edge, there's also the portion that covers the entire display itself that's invisible to you, but is actually catching the sun's rays and converting that to energy. But it does that at a lesser capacity than the outer edges. Now, in day-to-day use, you can go ahead and use the solar widgets to see how much solar energy you're getting on the watch at any one point in time based on whether under tree cover like this or out in bright sun. And you can see based on this little kind of sundial, each section that fills up indicates more and more sun. All of Garmin's battery estimates for the solar editions are based on 50,000 lux at 3 hours a day. And based on that, for the new Solar Instinct 2 series, they'll give you 1 day of battery life or 1 hour of GPS life. So it's kind of really simple to understand there. But the thing to keep in mind is that in the summer, 50,000 lux is actually pretty low. For me, for example, in the summer, if I'm at the beach, I'm gonna be clearing 100 to 120,000 lux, and I'll be there the entire day, not just 3 hours, for example. The point of that whole thing, though, is to note that Garmin has added more categories for forever power, meaning if you're spending more than 3 hours a day outside in 50,000 lux conditions, and you're not doing GPS all day long, then you can pretty much never have to plug it back in again. Of course, like all good things, eventually the summer ends and you're back to plugging it back in again. And if you find this kind of stuff interesting and useful, go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there. It really does help with this channel and the video quite a bit. The next feature is the addition of training status, training load, training recovery, VO2 max, training effect. All of the training things are now added to the Instinct 2 series. When you finish your workout, you'll see the training load displayed. That's based on heart rate data as well as for cycling power meter data if you have that. You'll also see your training status as well as the training effect, and then further you'll see the recovery times. In addition, you'll get some plain English guidance on whether or not that workout was good for you or bad for you. In addition to that, if your workout was intense enough, you'll also get a VO2 max estimate as well. Now, all of that data combined with the sleep data will go ahead and give you your daily suggested workouts. These are both for run and bike, and it's a new workout every single day that's designed to kind of keep on increasing your fitness. Now, if you've been doing too much lately, or if you're too fatigued, or if you're not recovering well or not sleeping well, it'll even tell you some days just to chill out and do nothing at all. Next, there's been a massive expansion of sensor support. So much so that I'm going to pull up my handy dandy cheat sheet here because there are so many new sensor types that I don't want to forget them all. The very first one is there's now support for power meters, which I've been using myself over the last while now. Two, there's support for smart trainers. There's support for the RD pod, which is used for running dynamics. There's also support for Bluetooth smart sensors, which was not supported on the original Instinct series. There's support for running dynamics in general. That includes from things like the HRM Tri, the HRM Pro, the HRM Run. There's also support for cycling dynamics from Garmin Vector, Garmin Rally, Favero Asiomo. Then there's support for swim offload data. So if you got an HRM Tri, HRM Pro, HRM Swim Strap, those will all get offloaded after their swim to the Garmin Instinct series. And then inversely, it'll now broadcast out on both AMP Plus, which it did before, but also Bluetooth Smart. So it'll take your heart rate from the optical heart rate sensor here and transmit it out so you can connect it up to apps like Zwift or Peloton. And in the case of Zwift, there's the new virtual running profile. So it'll not only send your heart rate data, but also send out your running pace and running cadence. And thus concludes the new sensor section, except one more, which is the next category, which is that now has the new Generation 4 Garmin Elevate optical heart rate sensor. This is the same optical heart rate sensor that's been added to most Garmin watches since last spring. It's now on the Instinct as well. The main benefit to this sensor, aside from increased accuracy, is also increased features. So the Instinct 2 series now has added a health snapshot. That's a feature that allows you to do basically a 2-minute test of doing nothing on a couch, and it'll go ahead and grab your HRV data, your stress data, your resting heart rate data, your pulse ox or blood oxygenation levels, as well as your HRV, stress, blood ox, pulse ox, breathing rate data. All that is included in this one snapshot, and then you can export that as a PDF if you'd like to. Atop that, with this new optical heart rate sensor, they can also measure swimming heart rate at the wrist. I'd say the accuracy on that is kind of hit or miss, but if you want it, it's there. If it works for you, awesome. And while we're talking about all sorts of health sort of stuff right now, I'll mention that Garmin has added your sleep data into the widget role. So you can actually see as soon as you wake up how much you slept, how your sleep score was, and then kind of general guidance on whether that sleep was good or bad for that given night. Next, Garmin has added both heat as well as altitude acclimation to the Instinct 2 series. That's something they added to the Fenix 6 series back about 3 years ago, but now it's on this watch as well. This means that if you start training in a place that's much hotter, it'll tell you how acclimated to that you are over a given time period, and the same is true if you go to high altitude locations. Do note that for the altitude acclimation, this is based on sleeping at altitude, so just simply driving to the ski area and then coming back at the end of the day won't increase your altitude acclimation any. Now, we know we're starting to round home right now, but this is where things get gooey and interesting. The next new one is the phone-based configuration. This was added to the Fenix 7 and Epic series just a few weeks ago, and allows you to configure all of the sport profiles and data profiles and features and all that fun stuff from your phone. So you don't have to sit here on the watch and click your way through every single data page slowly and painstakingly. You can just do it on your phone slowly and painstakingly. But once it's done, it's done. Now, do note though that unlike Garmin cycling computers, they don't have the ability to migrate your settings from your old watch to the new watch, at least yet anyways. Hopefully that happens down the road, but at least for now, again, you can do it on your phone as opposed to on the watch. Now here's another quick one. Garmin added Widget Glances. Now if you've been around the Garmin block a long time, you know that widgets, you press down and you go ahead and see different widgets for different areas like heart rate and compass and barometer, whatever you want. Those are all different widgets. But Widget Glances condenses those down into basically 3 per page as opposed to 1 giant page. And then you can tap into them to see even more pages for that particular glance. It just makes it a lot easier and a lot cleaner to get around the menu and interfaces. Next is a feature just for the camo or tactical-ish kind of looking edition, which is the new kill switch. And the idea behind this is that with a single button press, you can wipe all of the data on your watch. So that could be courses and activities and routes, even messages that came into it. Everything gets wiped in a single shot. Now, before we get to how this actually works, it's worth noting that people absolutely do use these watches in real-world military settings every single day. And We've seen actual news articles about that, showing the fact that these watches are used in those settings, both in training as well as in combat. And even beyond the military sort of settings, there's also plenty of aid and support organizations that may be working in hostile areas that may have a very good reason to be able to quickly wipe all the information if they needed to. The problem though is how this actually works behind the scenes, which is just simply a reset of the watch. Just like if you've gone into the settings and reset your watch, it does the exact same thing. And as someone that actually has a fair bit of experience in this particular field from a past life, I know that's not really good enough. I would have hoped that Garmin would have done a bunch of sequential writes to it and kind of rewritten over the data multiple times, something along those lines to at least stopgap the easy just kind of recovery of this data. Okay, so we've got two final sections left, accuracy and stability. So for accuracy, let's go ahead inside.
Okay, so we're gonna go through this kind of fast, but I've got all the stuff linked to my written review down below if you want to look at all those data sets yourselves. So first up here is a run through the forest, and for the most part, things look pretty darn similar. There are cases though where the instinct's a little bit offset, but then a couple seconds later, the vertex 2 is offset, so it's kind of a wash. The next item is a simple run, but it's got some buildings on it, and the buildings are pretty interesting. In this case, what you see is that the multi-band GPS on the Epics as well as the Vertex 2 do a better job getting around these sort of semi-tall buildings. It's not bad for the Instinct, but it's just not as perfect as the other units. Next, let's take it up into the mountains. And along this trail here, gravel biking, mountain biking, and you can see there's plenty of obstruction, but in terms of the actual tracks, they're basically spot on with all these other bike computers I have and all these other watches. There's really no scenario on this ride where there's any meaningful difference between the higher end units and the Instinct. And the same is true for the elevation plot. It looks perfect here. Now, if we switch over to a hike I did up in the jungle and then out to some cliffs and whatnot, in this area, again, they're virtually identical to the higher end GPS, especially in the switchback section. You can't tell the difference. Even here as well, there's a slight blip from one of the Instinct units, but it's not very much. Again, here against the higher end units, it's virtually identical. Now, I did see a little bit of drift, about 20-30 meters over the course of 5 hours on one of the Instinct units, but not the other, versus the Fenix 7 was virtually spot on to the actual altitude of the locale, given that it has the base map to work from. Now, here's the easy and boring one, open water swimming. It was spot on with the reference track. Another easy one on the heart rate side here. This was a simple run, straight and easy. Here is an interval workout on the bike, also pretty much spot on. Another interval workout on the bike. These are pretty high intensity workouts. Again, spot on. If we look at that gravel mountain bike, you can see going up, it was pretty much spot on as well. It was really, really good here. And then going down, it was a very proper dumpster fire, which is pretty common for wrist-based optical heart rate sensors. If we look at this hike I did, again, going up, it was great. And going down, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't like spot on or anything like that. And then finally, I look at one of my wife's sessions where she did the bike first for 30 minutes, and then she did a strength kind of lifting session after that. And you can see the bike was spot on. The lifting was very, very good, though a little bit late in a couple seconds here and there. But again, that's pretty normal for optical heart rate sensors while doing strength training.
Okay, so now we got the least best for last, which is crashes, stability, and bugginess, and all that kind of fun stuff. And it hasn't been a great experience, especially lately. And it's something that, basically there's two different camps of stuff. The first is things like crashes. And despite as bad as that may sound, it's actually not that bad compared to the other stuff. In the case of the crash, the watch just simply restarts. It's like a commercial break. It comes back. I've never lost any data. The things that have bothered me are things like course failures to load. And right now I'm in an area with zero cell phone service. So if I hadn't checked my course before I came out here, I would have wasted my entire day because it took me 2 hours to drive here. And then there's nothing around this for many, many hours. And then yesterday, for example, half my data from this watch stopped working with my power meter, yet that same power meter broadcast to this watch just fine. And then this watch at the end of the ride just gave me a completely bogus FTP number, basically as if I was like Hercules, like not even like doped Lance Armstrong would be this high. It was completely insane. And these are just like one of a pile of little issues I've had. And Garmin, to their credit, has been fixing all these things like one after another. Now I suspect Garmin will fix most of these issues and probably pretty quickly. As I said, they're fixing these as fast as I find them, but I think it's still gonna be at least a few more weeks until all these things are kind of settled out. Nonetheless, assuming Garmin can get this ball or watch over the line, it's a pretty impressive set of features for the price. There are no watches out there that have this many features for this price point, and it really shows the power of the way Garmin develops watches, the idea that it can take all these old features and put them in a new watch. That's because while these are all new features to Instinct, not a single feature on the Instinct 2 series is new to Garmin. They're all things from the Fenix 6 or the Fenix 7 or the Venue 2 or whatever may be pumped into the Instinct 2 with a different case and called new. And to their credit, that strategy works just fine. So with that, hope you found this video interesting or useful. If so, go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there or hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. There is still more to come. With that, have a good one.